This is Queer Cinema Catchup's Yellowjackets reaction for Season 3, Episode 8, A Normal Boring Life. Stick around if you're sometimes disappointed in Yellowjackets, but always hopeful the show can live up to the promise of its potential, or if you like to analyze the queer representation on the show. In this episode, our teens capture the wilderness guide Kodi and enlist him to bring them all to the rescue point so they can finally go home. Lottie, Ty, and Shauna, however, want to stay, and it sounds like Shauna might try to stop everyone from going home. That was the big cliffhanger at the end of this episode. In the adult timeline, the most interesting storyline was the reunion of adult Shauna and adult Melissa, played by Hilary Swank, still wearing her backwards baseball cap in her 40s, and alive after faking her own death and adopting a new name to avoid the Yellowjackets. Before I dive into this episode more deeply, I want to talk about the title, A Normal Boring Life, which comes from Melissa telling Shauna that's exactly what Melissa has found for herself, what she always wanted. Shauna tells her that this is a lie, and in some ways she's right. Melissa is going by another name now, Kelly, and has wound up falling in love with the scientist Hannah, who was captured last episode's daughter, Alex, after stalking her to make sure she's okay and safe. And they end up falling in love and having a child together. Alex has no idea that Kelly is actually Melissa, a Yellowjacket who is responsible for the presumed death of her mother, which doesn't really sound all that normal and boring to me. But otherwise, on the surface, their life is a normal one. They have a child, they go to church, they're happy, which is actually pretty remarkable given that Melissa and Shauna, like Ty and Van, had a queer relationship in the 90s. Being queer back then was antithetical to this normalcy. Part of the struggle even now, but especially then of coming out to oneself and others, is the question of, can I stand outside the norm? Can I give up the normal life of family I'm supposed to have, especially as a woman who is supposed to fill certain motherly roles in society? In the adult world of the show, which is closer in time to our own present, though before the most recent election, this is no longer true. Queer people can have normal, boring lives with families and a picket fence in many parts of the country, legally in all parts of the country, even if not everyone agrees. But they're still queer. There's still that otherness, that potential to stand outside the heteronormative expectations of the world, and that's scary and exhilarating, which is interesting because adult Shauna left the wilderness and married her high school hookup, Jackie's boyfriend, never left her hometown, tried to eschew all otherness. And yet it's Melissa in a queer relationship who seems happy and normal, who claims to be putting all of the darkness of their past aside, even if she has to lie about her true Yellowjacket identity to do it. Back in the wilderness as teens, our queer girls are actually grappling with this question head on. First, we have Lottie, who isn't in the text of the show queer as of yet, although we're always hoping more queer girls emerge in the wilderness. But she is queer in the sense that she has a mental illness that she's managed with medication since prior to their plane crash, and of course she ran out of medication since they've crashed. Out here without her medication, she has a role in their community forged by her ability to see and think differently, which is perhaps the cause of many of their issues, but is something. It's an identity, a purpose. One she'll never have at home, or she'll be seen as sick and in need of help for presumably the rest of her life. No wonder adult Lottie eventually founded a cult, the one place where her different from the normal could be seen in a wise shaman-like role again, where she can have power, ascendancy, purpose, and not just a normal boring life she'd have to take pills to fit into anyway. Then there's Ty. Teen Ty tells Van, who's very excited at the prospect of returning home, that they won't be able to be together when they do get back home, that the world probably hasn't changed all that much, that no one seems to realize this place, the wilderness, will follow them for the rest of their lives. Ty already knows she has to hide to be normal at home, and she's especially aware that this wilderness experience has just made that attempt at normalcy pretty much impossible. When we first meet adult Ty, she is out, she has a queer family, but she's done everything else perfectly. Ivy League educated, a politician, a successful big life. Adult Van, in contrast, has hidden herself away from the world and is more content to spend her time on the old movies in her video store. Teen Van tells Ty rescue matters more than any of her fears. But we know teen Van's home life wasn't exactly ideal. It's just that living in the real world in safety for Van is actually what's important to Van. The rest of the problems, the need to be normal, isn't what is crossing her mind. Finally, we have teen Shauna and teen Melissa. Teen Melissa feels the same as Van. She tells Shauna she can't wait to go home and do everything she didn't think she'd get to do. She lists the most boring parts of adult life, like having a 9-to-5. Shauna, in response, disassociates and hallucinates, I think, moths or butterflies, which you saw in a dream sequence earlier in the episode. If Ty is afraid of going home because she'll have to hide, because she'll be haunted by her past and her identity, her difference, Shauna seems bored and interested in what life will offer when they turn back, when they get to go back. It won't match the horror, tragedy, and power she's experienced out here. The life back at home, that normal, boring life, it can't fit Shauna. And Shauna is maybe ashamed of that, inspired by it, hoping to avoid it forever. She maybe doesn't even really know. She doesn't know why she wants to stay, but she knows something feels wrong about returning. And if she can't return, no one is allowed to either. They can't move on if Shauna can't. And thus she ends the episode by saying no when Nat says fine to the 3 girls who want to stay behind and is ready to storm off with the rest of the Yellowjackets and their guide and Hannah. Being queer is to be different. We can hide that difference, embrace it, name it, but it is always there, whether that queerness is a gay identity, a mental illness, or years spent as cannibals in the wilderness with your soccer teammates. It's there, always there, like an invitation, an albatross, an identity some of us can slip on or off. At the end of the episode, adult Shauna tells adult Melissa her normal is a lie. You're pretending. You don't get to have a normal life, is what Shauna tells Melissa. But she could be talking to herself, something Melissa seems to intuit. Adult Melissa scoffs at Shauna's assertion that her daughter Callie knows what she's done, what she's capable of, and still loves her. She tells Shauna that her thinking Melissa is after her is crazy. The brakes on her car were just old, that's why they broke. The freezer door just shut on its own, that's why Shauna got stuck in there. There was an abandoned phone in a bathroom. It wasn't Melissa or someone else trying to hunt down Shauna and scare her. It's not some plot to kill Shauna or the rest of the Yellowjackets. Shauna, Melissa tells her, makes her own problems because she hates herself and wants everyone else to feel as miserable as she does. It's kind of like telling all your teammates they can't get rescued because you have a bad feeling and you want to stay behind. The episode then ends with Shauna attacking Melissa in response to what she has said, pinning her to the ground, taking a giant bite out of her arm, shoving a hunk of Melissa's own flesh into Melissa's face, and saying, "Eat it, or I'll tell your family exactly who you really are." Whew. The cannibalism enters the adult timeline like this is telling. Or Otto, it's probably not called cannibalism if it's yourself. That eating other people, eating human flesh, enters the adult timeline like this is telling. Is what we do who we are? That's a question that applies to queerness too. We are queer because of sexual preference, except one can be bi and be with a member of the opposite sex. One can be queer and never explore it or come out. So it isn't what we do that makes us who we are, not exactly. That brings me back to the lie of normalcy. Shauna wants Melissa to see that that can never be them, whether they're queer or straight, because of what they did, who they are. And who they are kids who crashed in the woods and had to survive in savage ways that taught them the might and terror of their own power. Kids were then rescued and had to go back and pretend they were well suited to their normal, boring lives back home. Always knowing the queer ways that were open to them instead, the things they did, the people they were out in the wilderness. But they can still choose now if they want to fuck up themselves or the friends who are better able to adjust to boring, normal lives. Those are some thoughts I have on episode 8 of Yellowjackets. I'm much more invested as the season comes to a close. I think they've really, I don't know if I would say elevated the storytelling, but made it a bit more exciting and surprising. And they're taking big swings. It's still got its silly campiness, like the fact that Hilary's still wearing her backwards baseball cap in her 40s. And Melissa, I don't know if she'd really be doing that. I feel like we all change and evolve, but perhaps that's a sign that these kids have never been able to get over what happened to them out in the wilderness. And so I've kind of talked myself back into thinking that makes sense as a character choice. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are. If you have any thoughts about the queer representation in this episode of Yellowjackets or in general, or if you had any thoughts about the episode. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.